My hands traced the delicate lace on the wedding dress, a fabric I had helped her choose, a moment I believe symbolized everything a mother could wish for. It hung in its perfect white bag, a silent promise of a day filled with joy. And I remember thinking that all the sacrifices, all the years of putting her first, were worth it. This was our moment, a culmination of a lifetime of love. My heart was full, and my phone buzzed with a notification I thought would be a final detail for the celebration. But the words that appeared on the screen were a knife twist to the heart. A sentence from someone I had given everything to. "You're not invited to the wedding?" And in that single second, I learned that a heart can break without a single tear being shed. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. Jane's hands trembled slightly as I held the silver-wrapped gift box. It was a sterling silver picture frame, an heirloom quality piece that I had spent weeks searching for, engraved with a simple inscription, "To Ben and Sarah, for a lifetime of love." It felt heavy in my palms, not just from the weight of the metal, but from the immense weight of expectation and hope I had poured into it. Behind me, my husband of 42 years, Tom, stood frozen, his suit a dark pristine canvas against the warm afternoon light of our Atlanta living room. His tie was perfectly knotted, a deep blue that matched his eyes, which were now wide with a quiet sort of disbelief. We were ready. Our only son, our boy, Ben, was getting married in less than an hour, and we had meticulously prepared for this day. A day we had imagined countless times since he was just a little boy playing with toy cars in this very room. The words had hit me like a sudden, unexpected downpour. They were not shouted, but delivered with the detached, chilling clarity of a lawyer reading a final decree. Sarah's text message, the one that had just arrived on my phone, was short and devoid of any warmth. "Just to be clear," it began, a phrase that always preceded something cold and sharp. "I don't want you in any of the family photos. Know your place, Mrs. Tom." The last three words were a subtle but deliberate jab, a way of erasing me, not just from the pictures, but from my identity as Jane, a person, a mother, for 3 years, since Sarah had entered our lives. I had tried to be the perfect future mother-in-law. I had swallowed 1,000 little insults and condescending remarks, telling myself that it was just her way, that she was just stressed, that she was a product of a different generation. I had wanted so desperately for her to like me, to accept me, to see that my love for her son was not a threat, but a gift. I'd been wrong about all of it. Tom's hand found mine, his grip firm and reassuring. He had read the text over my shoulder, and I could feel his heart hammering in his chest, a frantic beat that mirrored my own. I looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw not just hurt, but a profound, weary understanding. We didn't need to say anything, the message was clear. We were not just uninvited to the photos, we were unwanted, a burden to be tolerated, but never truly included. Tom's jaw was tight, and for a moment, I saw the fierce protectiveness of a father rise in him, the desire to call Ben, to confront Sarah, to demand a reason for this cruel and public exclusion. But I held his hand tighter and shook my head, a silent signal that we would not be engaging. Not yet. We got into the car, the gift box still sitting on the passenger seat between us, a stark reminder of the future we had been so ready to step into, a future that no longer felt like ours. The 20-minute drive to the venue, a luxurious estate just outside the city, felt like a journey to an alien planet. We passed familiar streets and landmarks, but everything looked different, coated in a strange, painful glaze of unreality. As we pulled into the long, winding driveway, filled with expensive cars and beautifully dressed people, a sense of quiet dread settled over me. This was it, the point of no return. The grand old building stood before us, a symbol of the perfect day we had helped create, a day we were now being told we had no real part in. My phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call from Sarah. I answered it, my voice surprisingly steady. Her words, when they came, were like sharp, polished stones hitting against a window pane. "I've just spoken to Ben, and he agrees," she said, a hint of smug triumph in her voice. "This is our day. You are not to be present. We've decided to have an intimate dinner with just close family, and you're not on the list." The line went dead before I could even process what she was saying. My son had agreed to this. My son had agreed to uninvite us from his wedding dinner. The knowledge was a physical blow, more painful than any insult Sarah could have ever delivered. Tom's hand tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The words were a quiet, raw whisper, a sound I had never heard from him before. After we paid for all of this." He gestured towards the opulent venue, a gesture that encompassed a lifetime of financial support, emotional sacrifice, and boundless, unconditional love. I didn't have an answer. My mind was reeling, not with anger or a desire to fight, but with a sudden, painful clarity. The sacrifices, the quiet compromises, the endless attempts to please it had all been for nothing. I felt something new begin to form inside me, cold and hard and liberating, like a stone being polished smooth by years of erosion. I wasn't going to beg for a place at a celebration where we were clearly unwanted. A new resolve, as quiet and steady as the morning sun, dawned on me. I pulled out my phone again, my fingers, which had been trembling just a few minutes ago, now navigated with purpose and precision. I started with the baker, the one who had spent weeks perfecting the intricate layers of a 5-tier wedding cake, a replica of Sarah's childhood home. "This is Jane," I said, my voice shockingly calm, detached, and final. "I need to cancel our contract, effective immediately." The baker was stunned. "Mrs. Jane, the cake is being frosted as we speak. This is a $2,000 wedding cake." "I am aware," I replied, a chilling finality in my tone. "The contract is under my name. Please cancel it immediately." I hung up before she could say another word. The silence that followed was heavy with a mix of shock and a strange, powerful satisfaction. I didn't look at Tom, but I could feel his presence, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift that had just occurred. I took a deep breath and continued my work. My fingers moved across the screen, a precise, methodical dance of destruction. Next was the florist. I had personally selected every single bloom, from the deep red roses for the centerpieces to the delicate white lilies in Sarah's bouquet, a detail she had mentioned just once in passing. I found her number, the one I had saved with a little heart emoji next to it, and dialed. The sweet young woman who answered, the one who had worked with me for months to bring Sarah's vision to life, sounded so cheerful, so full of the joy of the day. "Mrs. Jane, I was just about to deliver the final arrangements. Everything looks absolutely beautiful." Her words were a stark, painful contrast to the reality of my situation. "I'm so sorry, dear," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. "I'm afraid I have to cancel the entire order. We've had a change of plans." Her voice faltered. But everything is already arranged. The flowers are cut, the arch is decorated." "What happened?" I simply said. "We've had a change of plans," and ended the call, the polite, formal tone a shield against the questions I couldn't bear to answer. One by one, I called every vendor, a litany of cancellations. The photographer, whose contract was in my name, answered with a nervous energy, his voice full of the buzz of the event. "Hello, Mrs. Tom, we're setting up the first look shots now. Everything's going to be perfect." I corrected him gently. "It's Jane. I'm calling to cancel your services. You'll be receiving a check for the non-refundable portion of your contract, but we no longer require your presence." He was so shocked. All he could say was, "Okay." Before I hung up, the band, a 6-piece jazz ensemble I had spent weeks auditioning, answered next. "Hello, the band is here and ready to go. The reception is going to be a blast." The cheerfulness felt like a mockery. "I'm sorry. I have to inform you that your services are no longer needed. The contract is terminated." There was a long silence on the other end, and then a faint murmur of confusion. Before I ended the call, the caterer, who I had worked with on a custom menu that included all of Ben's favorite childhood dishes, was the last call. The person on the other end, a manager I had grown to like. sounded concerned. Mrs. Jane. Is everything all right? I just saw the head of the serving team. And they've already started preparing the appetizers. Is there a problem with the menu? No, I said, my voice softer now, tinged with a deep, weary sadness. The problem is not with the food. The problem is with the family. I explained in a few clipped, precise sentences that my husband and I would no longer be attending, and therefore their services were no longer needed. The manager, to his credit, was kind. He simply said, I understand. I'm so sorry to hear this. It was the first glimmer of human kindness I had received all afternoon, and it nearly broke me. I hung up the last call and placed the phone back in my bag, a sense of profound stillness washing over me. The sound of the wedding music, faint but audible from the venue, was a jarring counterpoint to the finality of my actions. I leaned my head back against the car seat, and for the first time, I let the tears fall, not tears of grief, but of release. Tom reached over and took my hand, his grip firm and loving. He didn't say a word, didn't offer a platitude. He just sat there with me, a silent, unwavering pillar of support. We had been so busy giving, so busy trying to be the perfect parents, that we had forgotten to be a team. In that quiet car, we were a team again. We were not running away. We were walking away. A quiet, dignified retreat from a relationship that had become a one-sided transaction. That night, sitting in our quiet home, a house that no longer felt empty, we looked at each other and for the first time in a very long time, truly saw each other. We'd been so busy giving. We had forgotten to live. The next day, we met with our lawyer. The paperwork was simple but felt monumental. We changed our will, leaving a significant portion of our estate to a children's charity instead of to Ben. We weren't cutting him out entirely, but we were sending a clear message: love and respect are earned, not taken for granted. We then booked a flight to Paris, a trip we had always talked about but had never taken, always putting our children's needs and wants before our own. As we sat on the balcony of our hotel room, overlooking the Eiffel Tower, the city lights twinkling below us, I raised my glass to Tom. This is our day, I said, a smile finally reaching my eyes. The feeling wasn't revenge, but a profound sense of liberation. It was a new beginning, a quiet declaration that we were finally living for ourselves. They tried to contact us, of course, for months. The messages and calls continued, a mix of furious accusations and half-hearted apologies. I never answered. We had nothing left to say. The silence, our silence, was the most powerful message of all. I had learned that my voice didn't need to be loud to be heard, and that my worth was not determined by my presence at a table where I wasn't wanted. It was enough to know that in a world where I had been a ghost, I had finally become a person again. Even in the profound peace of our Parisian escape, the shadows of the past sometimes found a way to creep in. One afternoon, as Tom and I sat at a small cafe, sipping coffee and watching the city come to life, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. It was from a photographer's page I had followed in the months leading up to the wedding. A picture appeared on the screen, a beautiful but somber shot of a deserted ballroom, the chairs pushed askew, a single wilted bouquet on an empty table. The caption read, "Sometimes, even the best laid plans fall apart." It was a cold, quiet testament to the chaos we had left behind. In that moment, a wave of familiar pain washed over me, and for the first time since that day, a part of me wavered. I thought about Ben as a small boy, his hand in mine as we walked through the park, his infectious laughter echoing in my ears. I remembered staying up late to finish his science projects, the sleepless nights I had spent worrying about his first broken heart, the pride that swelled in my chest when he graduated from college, his tall figure in a cap and gown, searching for us in the crowd. Had all of that been a mistake? Had my love been so overbearing? My sacrifices so suffocating that he had felt the need to break free in such a brutal, definitive way? I felt an ache of longing to call him, to explain everything, to apologize for whatever I had done to cause this. I wanted to tell him that I forgave him, that I just wanted my son back. The desire for a simple, honest conversation was a raw, visceral need, and it was almost enough to make me give in. But then, as I watched Tom across the table, his face relaxed and unburdened, a new memory surfaced, one that had nothing to do with Ben. I remembered the day Tom had retired, his voice tired as he told me his plans to learn French and travel with me. I remembered how I had gently but firmly steered the conversation back to Ben's student loans and Sarah's new car, how our dreams had always taken a back seat to our son's needs. I remembered the look in Tom's eyes as he had quietly agreed, the subtle disappointment that had become so common a feature of our lives. My heart ached for him, for the man who had always been my anchor, who had waited patiently on the sidelines, while I devoted every ounce of my energy to a love that was not, and never would be, returned. In that cafe, under the Parisian sun, I finally understood. Forgiveness was not something I needed to give them, but something I needed to give myself. Forgiveness for spending decades trying to win a love that was never truly mine, for neglecting my own happiness and the happiness of the man who had loved me unconditionally. My silence was not an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation, a boundary drawn not with anger, but with a quiet, resolute love for myself and for Tom. I put my phone back in my bag, the wilted bouquet on the screen a fading memory. I looked at Tom and smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. I was no longer a mother waiting for a call, a wife standing in the shadows of her son's life. I was Jane, and I was finally free.